Man, I could have called this one. It was only a matter of time before Sony made the consideration of raising prices on both consoles and games. And this comes shortly after Microsoft already made the announcement that they're raising prices on their consoles, products, and games as well. That would make Sony the third major platform to increase prices. Nintendo announcing that their new Switch 2 consoles will range between $400 to $500. One of the standard versions of their games, Mario Kart World, was the first to increase their price tag to $80, helping to create a new norm for the standard price tag on standard versions of games. I mean, what are we really doing here? Is gaming only going to be for the middle and upper classes? Between paying a hefty price on your initial purchase for a console or a video game, players still have to contend with in-game purchases. And players also run the challenge of playing games completely designed to generate more in-game purchases, more recurrent consumer spending, more microtransactions. My question is, when do players believe enough is enough? Between Nintendo, Sony, and Microsoft basking in the glory of success, it seems like all three companies are feeling like we could cut into anything but our profits and will pass additional costs on to consumers. How long do we accept this, and to what end? I would like to reference this article from Tom Henderson with Insider Gaming, titled PlayStation 5 price hike could be next due to tariffs, Sony warns. In its last quarterly earnings, Sony has said that it's currently considering raising PlayStation 5 prices due to the current tariff situation with America. And this news comes from Sony CFO Lin Tao, who said the company currently needs to find approximately 100 billion yen. 100 billion yen is the equivalent to $512 million to make up for the impact of the current tariffs. Quoting Sony CFO Lin Tao, he says, in terms of the tariffs, we are not just simply calculating the simple tariffs or prices to come up with 100 billion yen, but are thinking about the current available information and looking at the market trend. We may just pass the price on to customers and also shipment allocation. So we are taking different measures and managing to come up with the 100 billion yen. Now, me personally, I was already anticipating a price hike announcement from Sony, considering that Microsoft already made the announcement that they're raising their prices. I thought it was inevitable that Sony would soon thereafter make an announcement for price hikes too. So here we are, new era in pricing for the video game industry. The Sony CEO weighed in on tariffs as well to say these hardwares can of course be produced locally. He says, I think that would be an efficient strategy, but the PlayStation 5 is being manufactured in many areas. At least the components are. So whether it's going to be manufactured in the US or not, it needs to be considered going forward in such a critical situation. So at the very least, it seems like Sony is currently weighing up its options on a PlayStation 5 console price hike and waiting to see how the current tariff situation shakes out. As of right now, seems like it's incredibly volatile. Now, it was just last month, Xbox had announced price increases across all of its hardware due to increased tariff prices, and Nintendo has seemingly already got ahead of the curve by announcing the Nintendo Switch 2 will launch at $450. Nintendo was also the first to introduce $80 games, with Xbox shortly following suit by saying some of its first-party games will now cost $80 starting the holiday season of 2025. Now, my personal and primary concern about these price hikes in video game consoles and video games in general is that they'll eventually be priced too high for low-income families if they're not already. Gaming, once an entertainment venue that was enjoyed from the lower to upper classes, is now seemingly pricing out low-income families. The gaming industry basically saying, if you don't make enough money, you can't play our games. I'm curious to hear your thoughts on that. Sound off in the comments. The announcement from Sony to increase their prices on consoles comes on the cusp of another major announcement. Top story: Microsoft is laying off 3% of all employees. Referencing this article from Sam Sepio with Insider Gaming, it says here that Microsoft has announced that 3% of the entire workforce is being laid off. As reported by CNBC via Charlie Intel, Microsoft has decided to lay off a large number of employees to, and I quote, implement organizational changes necessary to best position the company for success in a dynamic marketplace. Moreover, the company is working to reduce the layers of management with the upcoming cutoff. The report states that there's a chance this could be Microsoft's largest round of layoffs since 2023, when 10,000 employees were removed. But in regards to players, the number of employees who will lose their jobs in the gaming division, it just wasn't revealed. However, we do know that thousands of employees will soon be out of a job at Microsoft. The last round of layoffs at Microsoft was held in January of 2025, where the company let go of employees in the sales, security, and gaming teams. However, these cutoffs were performance-based. The latest layoffs are not performance-focused and aim to optimize the organization. So as Microsoft increases its prices on consumers, they also let go of 3% of their workforce. Now I get it. These large corporations, they're businesses and they have to make profits. They have to make money. But there seems to be a common theme going on where each one of the three major platforms are simultaneously increasing costs and passing those on to consumers, making it seem as if they're hurting for money. And I wanted to help put this back into perspective. The PlayStation 5 has now sold 77.8 million units, and it currently tracks the identical numbers to PS4 sales. Sony's fiscal year 24 quarter 4 financials have been released, and it definitely has some interesting facts to note. One of the key details is that despite the increased costs and struggles for demand early on, the PlayStation 5 is now tracking with PS4 sales. The PlayStation 5, it launched in 2020 and instantly became a top-selling console. Its price tag was significantly greater than the PS4's, but this hasn't stopped nearly 80 million units being shifted in the 4.5 years since. And this is what bothers me the most about Sony considering a price hike. Nearly 80 million units sold at a $500 price tag. That's a level of success that only other companies could hope and wish for. Do you guys know that in 2025 alone, the PlayStation has sold 18.5 million units? Between the sales of the PS4 and the PS5, it just kind of shows how dominant Sony and PlayStation have been over the last 10 years. And that's not to mention Sony software and their first-party titles, as they have contributed a good portion to Sony's success as well. And this has led me to doing some research on how players are feeling about the increased costs of video games. It seems like players are generally feeling mixed about the rising prices of video games. Many express concern about the increased costs, with some feeling it's a shift towards luxury prices rather than impulse buys. However, some developers and publishers have justified the price increase by pointing to rising development costs and inflation. Let's dive into some of the negative perspectives from players, as more and more players are feeling priced out. Many players feel that the higher price points are making games less accessible, especially for younger gamers and those players that are on a budget. It's perceived as something like a ripoff. Some gamers believe that the price increases are simply a way for companies to squeeze more money out of consumers. The increased price can also lead players to buying fewer games, relying more on free-to-play titles, and potentially delaying purchases of new hardware. And that's not to mention in-game sales, as some players who are already feeling the pinch of game prices are even more critical of microtransactions, seeing them as another way to drain their wallets. Now we could take a look at the flip side and positive perspective or justification for higher prices on video games and consoles. We have increased development costs. Developers and publishers argue that making games is more expensive than ever, with rising costs in development, technology, and talent. Inflation and tariffs play a major issue in rising costs as well. Inflation in the economy and tariffs on imported goods can also lead to higher prices, affecting both game development and hardware costs. Now, justification for a $70 to $80 price tag on games. Some argue that a higher price point is justified for games that offer very high quality and an immersive experience, with the argument that it's simply a different way of doing business. Now let's talk about the growing demand, because as it stands right now, gaming is the #1 entertainment venue for most people. While some worry about higher prices hurting sales, others argue that the gaming market is still robust and there's a demand for higher quality games, even at a higher price. Other considerations for gamers to keep in mind are indie games. The rise of indie games and their often lower price points can also influence player perceptions of AAA titles, potentially making the higher prices for AAA games seem even more extreme. Players that are concerned about accessibility also have the option of subscription services. The popularity of game subscription services like Xbox Game Pass and PlayStation Plus can also affect how players think about purchasing individual games, as they might be more likely to pay for a subscription and get the opportunity to play a wider range of titles. All in all, it's the player's responsibility to consider their player behavior. Ultimately, player behavior and spending habits are also a factor. Some players may continue to purchase games at higher price points, while others may adjust their spending habits, potentially leading to more free-to-play titles or older games. If you guys are anything like me, I've been leaning toward older games. I just personally really dislike the direction we're headed in pricing on video games and consoles. To me, it just seems like big business is taking over, and not only in regards to increasing prices, but also the development of these games. The gaming industry once had a wholesome quality to win is now being infiltrated by big business. And I believe this is partly why some of our more successful titles in recent years have been created by some of the smallest studios in the gaming industry. They're passionate about gaming, they're passionate about their creativity, they prioritize player immersion, and also prioritize the player's experience. Basically, if you make a good game, it's gonna sell. If you make a good game, players will pay and they'll receive it well. As always, I'm curious to hear your thoughts on all this stuff, so sound off in the comment section below. If any of you guys are new here, consider dropping a like and a sub on your way out. And I'll catch you guys on the next video. Easy, y'all.